Alrighty, we are here with episode 3 of our podcast, and I'm excited to say that we actually have a name for the podcast finally. So we'll announce that here in a second. Just some housekeeping. We always love to hear from who's out there. If you're listening, let us know where you're listening from, and of course, feel free to ask comments, make comments during the show, and we'll give you some shout outs. Mark, thank you for tuning in. Hello to you as well. Mark, where are you calling in from? I'd be curious to hear as well. And Kevin, so I think before we jump into the topic of the day, which is going to be around getting your story straight. A lot of vendors, MSPs, when they're out there talking, don't always have a concise way of telling their story. And we found that to be an issue really across the board.
It is.
And but before we get, it's kind of the teaser into what we're going to be talking about today. What's going on in your world, the venture mentor world?
Wow, it was another great week. Worked with 3 new organizations, new vendors in getting their story straight. Went through discovery processes to understand what their message is, and really whether their message is consistent, right? So with what they want to say versus what they actually say and what their SDRs say and what have you. So we'll kind of get into some of this stuff during this episode, but spent a lot of time working with some just really kick butt, innovative, some startups, 1 or 2 that have been that are maturing. So it's been a busy week from that standpoint, and in my new offices, new digs. We got a little paint to get done or what have you, but we're set up camp in the launch workplaces in Edgewater, Maryland, of all places.
Yeah.
So an incubator. I think they've got locations all over Maryland, DC, and Virginia, but this happens to be a mile from the house. Unfortunately for you, it's a little bit further.
Not quite a mile, but against traffic, so not terrible.
Opposite commute, so looking out for you. But so working with a whole bunch of companies, getting this thing spun up and off the ground, and looking forward to a number of really kick butt things moving forward. So what about you? What are you up to?
Yeah, well, first things first, we should note, we didn't actually paint this color, but interestingly enough, it does work as a green screen.
It does.
So that was kind of just dumb luck. We're not doing a green screen today, but we kind of lucked into having a wall that actually is applicable for green screen. And just want to give a couple shout outs to people who are chiming in. Sam Harris, good morning to you as well. Mark is actually out of Georgia, so shout out there. Brent out of Southern California. So we met Brent in some of the earliest days of ID Agent at Robin Robbins Roadshow in Los Angeles. I think was the first time that we met Brent. We got a shout out from South Africa.
Wow.
And as I always like to say, once we get a shout out from an international person, that we have a worldwide audience. So thank you for tuning in. In my world, actually the first couple of days I was in New York City with a group called the Transformers. Mike Schmidtman has a group where it's really interesting because he's bringing in sales leaders from technology. A lot of them are MSPs, but really covering all the different technology sectors. And it was really unique. So they had me come speak about social selling and kind of building a presence on LinkedIn, or really whatever form your customers are in, because that's probably the most important. If they're on TikTok or if they're on Facebook, that's where you need to be. But for me, what was most interesting when I go to conferences, I'm usually, it's the MSP, at least one of the MSPs, it's mostly the owners, sometimes the marketing managers. It's not often the VP of sales. And I always think of myself as a salesman first. So it was really fun to just be part of a group of my own people in a way, and just talking through, all the different challenges that we're facing. I think really everybody's facing hiring issues.
Yeah.
You
see commonalities between the challenges that MSPs face and vendors face?
Yes and no. So I think, hiring, yes. Yeah. So like everybody's struggling to hire.
Absolutely.
I think the difference maybe is if it's a less mature MSP, they're still deciding whether they need that first salesperson or can afford to have that first salesperson. But the commission structure is something that was a topic that was really came up a bit. Commission structure and the structure of like, do you need an SDR?
Mm-hmm.
Do you just need kick butt marketing and lead generation? So what's the team look like? And then also, how do you compensate them so they actually stick around? So an MSP sale is not as easy. It's not cut and dry, right? And so you see a lot of salespeople going more to a SaaS technology company because a lot of times those are more simple sales. They're not as complex. So that was a big topic. I mean, we could have gone on for probably two more days on just those topics alone. So that was what I've been doing. And just kind of another shout out is we went on a 105 foot sailboat and did a little tour around the Hudson River and got to see the Statue of Liberty. So it was very fun.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. And you got an event coming up here at the end of the month, right?
Yeah, and actually, kind of that was what brought it together in a way, because that event, Build It, which we're both going to be at, and I put the registration, if anybody wants to join, there's still tickets available. But yeah, one of the evening activities that they're doing is they've rented out the entire Statue of Liberty Island, and so it's going to be the entire MSP community together on the island, which I can tell you, I talked to local New Yorkers. No one's ever done that before.
It's pretty amazing.
So it's definitely a unique experience, and please join us at the end of or in really 2 weeks. So
yeah, and then we'll see our guy Gary V up there. It's
Yeah.
funny. I was thinking about some of the earlier days with Ideation, where we had up in the walls, in the hallways, pardon my language, but get shit done, and all these sayings. One was crush it, and I know what Gary V's book is. I think he started to become famous around the time that he published that book, right? Crush it.
Yeah.
But it was something that we would say all the time: just get shit done, just go out and crush things. And that was kind of a mantra, two mantras that we kind of lived and died by at Ideation. So it'd be great to actually see him in person at a real live event. So that'll be a fun one at the end of the month. But so jumping into this topic this week, I was actually wanted to title it "Things That Piss Me Off," because this is something that you see both with MSPs and vendors. That's why I was asking: do you see commonalities?
Right.
And so, working with both MSPs and vendors, it's pretty apparent after the first couple of days of just doing interviews and just understanding their sales processes, their go-to-market motions, their marketing processes. You start to see disconnects, and this is universal. Surprisingly, I haven't seen one company that has really, really, truly nailed it from start to finish. But you start to see a lot of disconnects in messaging, marketing messaging, messaging at trade shows versus inside, and then all the way through the sales process. Again, this is applicable to MSPs and vendors. And so, one thing that surfaced over the last couple of days with some of these customers is that we started looking at what their message looked like on their homepage, right? So that's kind of your business card, your front door to the organization. Started looking at the messaging in the homepage, and then started looking at messaging at events. So presentations that they were doing at events, and you could see pretty clearly that there was a disconnect. And it happens quite often, right? Because with events and presentations, those are often timely, topical in the moment. And if you're doing an event next week, you're putting your time and energy and effort into getting that presentation ready and talking about what's timely and topical. And that often goes far past where the homepage of the website is, because marketing doesn't have a chance to catch up, and there's always a disconnect between marketing, sales, and BD. So that's a universal challenge across the board between MSPs and vendors. It's something that surfaced quite a few times this week. And then feel free to jump in, but then you start to see downstream disconnects. So you'll see differences between what the website looks like, what the virtual or in-person presentations look like, and then you'll see major disconnects with what the inside sales team's working with. And that's where things just go oftentimes really astray. You'll have some rogue SDRs or inside salespeople that are using a PowerPoint presentation from 6 months ago, or maybe they're calling together different elements of different PowerPoints and coming up with their own statistics, and they're taking the sales process all the way to the left or all the way to the right. So it's another strong disconnect that I'm seeing across the board. Again, both MSPs and vendors. And so I don't know if you see the same thing or.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that is noticeable on some websites, and I think everybody's made these mistakes. I'm positive we did at IEHA. It's just like you said on the website, not even having things that are up to date. And it could be a small thing, but if you're a customer, a potential customer, and you're looking at it and you're just noticing these small things like they're not even like they're saying the next show that happened 3 months ago. It's just little things that could be the difference between like, well, they're not even keeping up with their website. Is this somebody I'm going to trust with my entire infrastructure potentially?
Yeah.
So I think those little things do matter in keeping things up to date. You see blogs where they haven't blogged since 2014, and it's like, well, why even have that? You're better off actually not even having a blog page at that point, because you're showing that you halfway committed to something and kind of gave up on it. So yeah, those are definitely things I've noticed. With presentations, definitely a lesson I learned myself is, to your point, that you want to have a couple different presentations potentially, both on the vendor and MSP side, but you need to constantly update it. But you need to make sure whoever is going to do presentations has access to the most up to date.
Yeah.
And you're doing it on a SharePoint, not on a desktop. We all make copies for whatever reasons on desktops. You might need to do it for a presentation for whatever reason. Maybe you're afraid you're not going to have internet access, but it still always has to go back to that original presentation. So keeping separate folders and just really being organized around that stuff. That was something I had to learn the hard way, because we did have some issues with that where we were like, oh wait, this is the presentation from 3 months ago, not the one that we're doing today. So
yeah, that really, I think, drives home the point that this is a small little ecosystem. There's tens of thousands of you out there, but MSPs face the very same challenges that vendors face. Vendors face the very same challenges MSPs face. Especially if you use that 80-20 rule, right? 8% of the vendors and 8% of the MSPs are in that maturing to less mature space. And so they're often, oftentimes it's a self-funded, or it's scrappy upstart, or it's, they're just getting by. And so, yeah, is it top of mind to go back to the website and update the events? Do you have a marketing coordinator or a CMO actually thinking about that? And the answer often is no, right? Until you start to get to velocity. So there's a chicken and egg with a lot of these things, but I think the pivot is that you really have to put your best foot forward, and it has to be consistent all the way through the chain. So I'd stop that, the disconnect between your external presentations and what the SDRs or inside sales team, communicates or deals with, and then you've got the downstream. Say you're successful in bringing on a customer, you sign up an MSP, or MSP signs up a customer. Is that messaging getting carried forward? Your latest releases or your latest products, is that being marketed properly to your existing customers? And the big issue across the board now, again, because MSPs are maturing and getting wise to subscription, billing models and monthly recurring revenue. But, are your product releases, are the new products that you're working with as an MSP, are they up to date on your marketing materials? Does it give your inside team or your support team the ability to have a sales conversation and create additional downstream revenue? Because obviously for everybody, that's the most cost-effective revenue, right? Is it grows to the existing customer, cross-sell, upsell. So these are universal challenges, but these are challenges that create so much friction up and down the chain. And again, it's not a vendor problem. It's not an MSP problem. It's an industry problem. It's probably more general, business, entrepreneurial startup, challenge. But you think about the friction that causes, starting with the vendors. If you're not giving the partners the most up-to-date materials, up-to-date marketing, collateral to help them sell, and then you're not distributing that as an MSP to your teams properly and communicating that properly, you're creating a lot of friction, a lot of wasted sales opportunities up and down the chain. So I think that's something that really everybody should be thinking about. I did a quick post on LinkedIn yesterday. Get these kind of harebrained moments when I'm running and have an idea, and it's like, well, what are you going to do? What's a growth hack that you can implement today, tomorrow, Monday, next week? What's something you can do to change what you're doing today and be more effective and growth oriented moving forward? And it's, yeah, I can sympathize and being on all sides of the table, growing a services company and, the technology companies and working for very large organizations. These are universal challenges, but these are things that have to be ironed out sooner rather than later if you really want to start to get to velocity.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of things, and I want to go back to them, which is onboarding and then some up-to-date materials. But I do want to give a couple of people shout outs who shouted us out. Edward is tuning in from Central Florida. Barbara, who's always an awesome supporter out of Newfoundland, Canada, and Andrew Moon, getting a little too excited about his home state of Ohio with the OHIO. Going to cause some controversy with our Michigan folks here, but we appreciate you all tuning in. And one, I just want to say thank you to the people who are listening. We're in the beginning, very early stages of what this is going to look like, and it's certainly not perfect. And I think that's something we always preach is like, what, it doesn't have to be perfect today. It's going to get to a point, and I know we're going to go back and look at these years from now and be like, wow, I can't believe people were listening originally back then. But I think it's just get out there. Brent, for vendors, it's getting new talent is a big issue. I hate having to continue to break in new sales rep. Yeah, I mean that's always a problem. And I can also say that was a big conversation, a big topic of the conversation we were having. Again, how do you keep people, young people, who are kind of prone now to not stay 10, 15 years at one place? So I think definitely a topic area we can touch on. But you mentioned having up-to-date materials, and it could be the most basic of materials, like FAQs, for example. I actually had this conversation with an MSP sales guy just this week when I was in New York, and he was just saying, this vendor hasn't updated their FAQs since we partnered with them 3 years ago. Now, it's possible the FAQs have stayed the same, but it's very unlikely. I mean, the world's changed a lot, so it's even those little things. And I think when we talk about just concise messaging and story, because both MSPs and vendors, I think, struggle of what content to put out there, what to speak to. FAQs is a great place to start, because FAQs are generally also objections sometimes. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for content, just answer the FAQs that people would be asking. Yeah. Just put that out on video. So you can do a little video where it says, X, Y, Z, and then you answer the question. And a lot of times you're answering objections that, when they're doing research on you as an MSP or as a vendor, you might actually be answering the objection because you've answered that now on the FAQ. So that's one thing. And then onboarding, another issue was that we talked about with one of the MSPs, for the first time lost a client because of the onboarding experience. And I mean, as a salesperson, that is just, for the owner, for everybody, it's devastating. But onboarding processes are super critical. But it was just a topic that was absolutely, I see we got a Michigan shout out here too.
There you go.
There you go. But and that might be a topic for another day. And actually, Edward actually comes in. Can you talk about hiring versus contracting sales for the small MSP? So, Kevin, you've had experience. You're not on the MSP side, but still similar when you're starting up a business and having to make that,
I can speak actually from Winville, from a services perspective, right? I'm always weary of contract sales. I think there's some phenomenal contract business development, lead generation platforms and groups out there. But when it comes to entrusting somebody with the sales process, there are potential benefits, and you can make arguments for the cost and commitments and dabbling and stuff like that with contract sales. But at the end of the day, it's not, in my opinion, the most effective model. I think there are better things to smart source or outsource or 1099. I think this is challenging because of perceived labor shortages and all that. But I think it's absolutely best to have people on staff, people committed. Um, I never like having one foot in, one foot out. Again, there's some smart ways to smart source and outsource. Some elements of business development and marketing and lead generation. But when it comes to the actual sale, you want people, in my opinion, on board and committed and bought into the ethos and the mission of the organization. That's where you find the most effective sales. And you're mentioning recruiting challenges and coming up with the right sales compensation models. I mean, the world has changed for better or for worse. It has changed. Folks have a lot more options. There's a lot more options when it comes to work from home, telecommuting, hybrid schedules. There's really interesting things happening in the benefit space. I was surprised. I was working with a group last week, going through their job descriptions, and one of the benefits is pet care. They provide a stipend for pet allowance, pet care, and the rationale is that people working from home and pets are becoming valuable members of the sales team, because they're normally popping through the background of Zoom and people are laughing at it and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a very interesting conversation, but there's a lot to be looked at when it comes to compensation models with hiring models. But at the end of the day, I'm not a fan of outsourcing. One of the most vital or 1099, you're one of the more vital positions within the business. I mean, that's the make or break. Without sales, there is no business. So it's tough to say that again when some of these areas of the countries where unemployment rates are still ridiculously low, and we're here in the Mid-Atlantic, just outside of DC, and it's often a very recession-proof. No matter which way the economy's going, we always have a pretty low unemployment, and hiring and in general is always challenging. So, I don't know. That's my. I'm not going to say it. You know what I was going to say, but yeah, that's my not very short answer to that question.
There you go.
Yeah.
So two things. The pet thing just got funny. It's just like, I mean, it was pet explosion. I know this is not the topic we're going down, but I actually invested in, I bought some stock in an insurance company that specializes in pet insurance.
I bet.
It's killing it, by the way. Because I also have a COVID puppy, and so do you, actually.
So do.
I picked up on that real quick. Our apartment complex had 3 times as many dogs I shouldn't say COVID hasn't ended, but like since COVID started, basically. But and this could be a hybrid, because I tend to agree with you about having somebody who's just invested in the company, and it'll bring up another topic which I hadn't heard about in this space before. Maybe a hybrid of contracting would be more of like, hey, you're really connected to X1, my customers. If you do an introduction and it leads to business, I'll pay you like a referral. I like the referral model versus like some big contracting agreement where you have to do a bunch of training. I don't know. I tend to agree, like have somebody who's invested. But keeping salespeople, particularly on the MSP side, at least from when I've spoken with MSPs, has been very challenging. Some of the more mature MSPs that I was speaking with this week have some type of annuity type of agreement where you basically keep getting commissioned on the the continued business year after year. And so they have salespeople that have been there for 15, 20 years. And obviously the percentage is going to go down, and I don't know what percentages people were being paid, but man, talk about a way to keep your employees invested or profit sharing. As an owner of a business, you got to make the right decisions, but there's a lot of MSPs with really great EBITDA that could give a little bit back potentially. I don't know if I'm starting a controversial conversation, but that maybe they can give a little bit back to keep that talent around.
I think it's a fair point, because you've seen top 10% of the MSPs, maybe top 20% of the MSPs that have thrived in this environment. They've done ridiculously well, and they have dropped a ton of numbers or percentage down to EBITDA, and they've had explosive growth. But now we're coming into the point where things have evolved with COVID, and I think a lot of businesses are having to take a pause because they realize that the business doesn't It's not what it used to be. And so you're going to have to start reinvesting into employees and coming up with creative ways like an incentives or annuities is a real interesting concept. So you got to look at, cost of sale and what that does to numbers downstream. But yeah, I think the ones that did well over the last 18 months are probably the ones that are thinking about this. They're always trying to stay ahead and coming up with creative ways to incentivize and retain. I mean, it's that's equally as important, if not more important, than your churn, right? Because employee turnover leads is one of the key indicators of a business's overall churn. Right? If you can't keep employees, you can't keep good salespeople, you can't keep good people on service desk, can't keep good people in operations. That's a leading indicator of whether you're going to have a high churn or viable, healthy business. And again, you have to look at these through different lenses because of hyper competitive markets and costs, what have you. But these are all the fascinating topics to really dig into when you're working with a business, to understand the nuance of each business and how, if you turn a dial left, turn a dial right, how it impacts the overall health of the business. And I think we talked about in one of the last episodes that this maturity curve. There are some, a fair percentage of this marketplace is becoming much more mature. I'm talking about the MSPs. There are a number of private equity groups coming in and rolling up MSPs because they see the ones that were ahead of the game, that had their numbers dialed in. They're on top of it. They had ridiculously solid EBITDAs. They're the ones that are getting rolled up rolled up quick. And so it's part of the battle is just being out in front, being hyper aware, being out in front, being consistent, and tackling those problems head on. So
absolutely. And just one thing I'll mention about the profit sharing. My uncle owned a medical supply company, and he had a profit sharing model, and it changed some of his employees' lives. It was people who weren't able previously to save enough for a down payment to buy a house, and with profit sharing they were able to do that. And guess what? They were as loyal as possible of employees, and all of them stayed really from the beginning of his business to the end, to the exit. So just something to think about. I think it does build loyalty, and it I always like when employees invested. There's lots of quotes about like your employee, you as an owner, you want people to care as much as you, but most people don't. It's not theirs, and they're not getting what ultimately at the end game you're going to get out of it from a monetary standpoint. It's not theirs. But when you make it, and through profit sharing or whatever system you come up with, I think you get them invested in a way that that sort of matches that potentially. And if I have my way, you'll meet my uncle on this podcast sometime soon. Yeah. So we'll see about that. And Barbara chimed in, pet benefit would attract me. 5 cats here. So Barbara, it sounds like you could start a cat podcast based on that. But yeah, it's really interesting, the different benefits that have evolved over the last 20 years.
Yeah, and you have to evolve as things evolve, and especially for a lot of owners, a lot of operators of MSPs, and for a lot of CEOs of these vendors, it's hard to evolve. It's hard sometimes to get out of the way. This is, it's hard to evolve when you're in the weeds and trying to jump in on top of marketing. You're trying to jump in and try to put processes in place and make sure that the book is balanced and all that stuff. It's ridiculously hard, but you have to force yourself to do it. And the ones that have done that, the ones that have been able to force themselves to evolve and figure out ways to get out of the way, those are the ones again that have done ridiculously well. I think back to early days in startup land with my consulting firm, where I would log into the website, I'd add a page or add something to a page, and they come in the next morning, what the hell did you do? You spelled this wrong, right? I spent hours, balancing, the books, every check that came in, every dollar in, dollar out, and then realized I wasn't being effective from a strategic standpoint. And this is part of that growth model as well. But once you started bringing in people that could do it and do it better than you, that allowed you to go out and be more strategic and focus on growing the business. That's when, at least for me, my background, that's when Windvale took off and Ideation took off and all these others have taken off. So it's a hard thing to do. I know at the top of the show we were talking about consistency, right, and messaging, and a lot of these businesses are run based on the personality of the business owner, and so I challenge every business owner to think about that one kind of concept, right? Is this business a reflection of me? Is this homepage of the website a reflection of me? And do I need to get out of the way, and how do I get out of the way and bring on people that can really start to help crush it?
Absolutely. So one, being cognizant of everybody's time. First, we want to thank everybody for continuing to tune in. The great thing is we're going to be coming out with a lot of different formats. So you don't always have to see us live. We love it when people see us live because then we get the interaction. It definitely makes it more fun for us and hopefully more fun for you. I'm going to try to put this up. So Kevin, this is actually, they can just put up their phone. It's a QR code. Everybody knows QR codes. They've kind of made a big comeback, I think, in this COVID environment, virtual stuff. So we are going to be putting out these videos on YouTube. So if you subscribe on YouTube, you'll get, be able to continue to get the content if you're not able to see it live. So there's something really nice about that. So again, just you can do a QR code. So Kevin, I guess maybe you want to talk about how we finally came up with a name for this.
Oh, yeah, brutal. Now we spent hours and hours thinking, what the hell are we going to call this thing? Do we focus on channel? Is there something broader than channel? Can we make this, a top 10 podcast on all the platforms? Is channel big enough? Is my personality big enough? Sure it is. Is Matt's? I'm not sure. No, he's trying to get the biggest personality out of it, but. Yeah, we spent a ton of time trying to figure out the name, and we figured, let's stick to channel. Let's keep it channel specific. And so moving forward, we're going to bring some really interesting guests on to the show. So there are going to be some movers and shakers from within the channel, but I think one of the greatest things about this model moving forward is that we're going to bring some people from outside the channel that will give us, I think, the channel even a broader perspective on what's going on in sales, marketing, innovation, leadership. So you'll hear from some of the names that we all know and the ones that are the influencers in the space. But we're gonna dig deep to go outside the space and bring on some really kick butt folks that will provide a ton of value, and they have to provide value to be on this show. So that's can't settle on that one.
Yeah, we're gonna really try to get resources to give it back to our community. And you didn't even tell them the name.
Well, I thought they could see it up here.
No, they can't see it up there.
All right, fine. Well, we came up with the name Channelfied. So you will be channelfied once you listen to this podcast, this show. Come on the show, you will be officially channelfied.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and we also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Mail Protector. And actually, if you're going to be at the Build It event in New Jersey, Jersey City, Mail Protector will be there. I know they're working on a workshop and legitimately putting lots of hours. I know that they said it's going to take them between like 10 and 20 hours to put that workshop together. So,
I get a sneak peek on what they're. Part of what they're talking about, and then we got to talking about what their platform does. They're going to be doing some really cool things in the encryption space, forthcoming here, and they're going to, I think, change the game when it comes to email security. So that's we're stoked to have them as our first sponsor. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And last thing I want to put up there, and I'm messing around with this, and this is why I like to share some of the things I'm testing out. So this is through a company called Community. So Gary Vee's actually an investor in it. And what it allows you to do is create a text message service where you can connect to people directly. And so if you're out there and you want access to Kevin and I, you'll be able to, if you literally just text this number, it'll ask you to, I'll respond and it'll ask you to accept me as a contact. And then you'll be able to have us in your contacts. We'll be able to send you, some of the latest information. We're definitely going to be getting, discount codes to certain events. So for example, build it. I actually have a discount code that's expiring by the end of the weekend. So if you're interested in that, you literally can just text me. It's a much easier way. We all know email is very cluttered sometimes. So this is a great way to just connect with us directly. I'm testing it out. I'll definitely be talking about it, I think, on this show and letting you know if this is an opportunity for you to do this within your own community. You know, we don't have to all be at Gary V's level for this to make a difference. Like, I mean, imagine being able to connect with your top 100 customers. And I'm not talking about like they're doing support tickets, but you're able to put out a message like, hey, we're doing a webinar or we're doing an in-person event, luncheon next week. And you're able to put that out to your top 100 customers through text versus email. So I think it's really interesting. I'm toying around with it. And yeah, so hopefully some of you that are listening will put it, will reach out.
Yeah, if you're just listening, the number is 202-918-5245. Again, 202-918-5245.
There you go. There you
go. So I think one of the last things to wrap up with is that, yeah, we've settled on this podcast name. You know, I think you'll see over the next couple of weeks some really kick butt things coming out of it. I've said that quite a few times in this episode, kick butt. I gotta stop saying that one. But you'll see, I think, a pretty cool evolution of this podcast and leading up to, I think, some really innovative, how do I say it? Innovative solutions forthcoming over the next 2 quarters or so. So stay tuned. Another reason to keep up with us with the text and subscribe to the show, because we're gonna be, you know, taking behind the scenes of building something pretty kick-ass.
Yeah, and I'll put up that subscribe for the YouTube channel just one last time. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I think, you know, the theme was finding, you know, ways to make your story more concise. We're in that process. We're doing it live in front of you, which is a little bit more tricky sometimes. But I think, you know, over the next couple of weeks, you'll see us do the exact same thing, you know, we're telling you to do, and we'll make this pretty concise, and it'll, I think, you know, it'll be a great resource for everybody in the channel. They're going to get channelified officially.
Damn right.
Thank you for tuning in.